Sphere and Vanishing Light, which is their best tools against Underworld Connection and Erebos God of the Dead. So that's where the upgrade is the most pronounced. But Eric up a game here and appears to be in a commanding position here in game 2.
Yeah, he does have an Elspeth that hasn't been answered. But you're absolutely right about Abrupt Decay being good for this matchup. I actually had the chance to talk to Eric Rill about this matchup yesterday going into the tournament, and he found the card to be, it's good. I mean, he acknowledges it's good against him. He's actually looking into the possibility of playing a blue-white control deck that, instead of playing the Detention Spheres and Banishing Lights, instead played Planar Cleansings to actually next level the Abrupt Decay strategy. In the end, he decided to still go for the standby list that he is playing, but he's acknowledging that Abrupt Decay has actually posed issues for his deck.
Yeah, when I wrote my article after week 1 of Journey to Nixon Standard, I mentioned that I felt something like that could be happening, that the Detention Sphere Banishing Light plan may no longer be good, and players may want to be going onto a more counterspell, deicide, planar cleansing oriented path to fight the Abrupt Decay decks. But Eric's still standing by his, essentially the build he's been playing for a while now.
All right, Elspeth goes ahead and makes 3 more soldier tokens here, and on end step, Dan's going to go ahead and Abrupt Decay a Detention Sphere, getting back Underworld Connections and drawing a card. But he's going to need quite a few cards here. Right now it's 10 to 10, and Elspeth certainly has been going to work, so he's going to need a Hero's Downfall very quickly.
Yeah, unchecked Elspeth, of course, one of the best ways to beat Mono Black or just about any deck, quite honestly.
Yeah, well, right on the mark there. His draw for the turn was a Hero's Downfall, so half the battle for Dan, could happen here. He first would have to get the Elspeth off the table, and that has to resolve. Then he's going to have to take care of the fact that Elspeth still has 5 tokens left.
And somehow beat the cards in Eric Rill's hand, which, if they're counterspells or Sphinx's Revelation, is going to be very challenging.
Right. There's a lot of work left to be done, but he has the first step taken care of.
Yeah. So you've played a lot of blue-white control. How do you feel about this matchup?
Well, the matchup is, I think game 1, it's fine. I think game 2, the games 2 and 3, it becomes pretty draw dependent. The fact that the deck has so many duresses can be good against you. A lot of times it depends on what you can top deck. You know that the Mono Black deck will take care of most of your cards, and it'll Thought Season duress most of your cards in the early game. So you start a lot of games with a hand of, which is basically just lands, as they'll take all your relevant cards, and the game's about trying to find and top deck answers on time for the relevant cards that Mono Black has.
So you actually are looking for land-heavy draws for the most part to try to fight through the discard and then just top deck relevant stuff.
Right. I mean, if you have a 5-land 2-spell hand, it's going to play out like a 5-land 0-spell hand a lot of the time. And if you do, if you say have 5 lands, 2 detention spheres, you'll be lucky if even one of those detention spheres ever gets to be cast.
So it looks like Dan taking a slightly more conservative approach here with just the Pack Rat. Maybe trying to, assuming that Eric's going to rev, and he'll have a spot here to take care of that Elspeth, but...
Yeah, he's going to go ahead and upkeep, try 2 Heroes Downfall it. He wants to go ahead and get Eric's mana on Eric's own turn, but Eric was still happy to do that. He'll cast Dissolve on his own upkeep to protect Elspeth.
Yeah, I think that Dan was hoping maybe Eric here taps out for Sphinx's Revelation. With the shields down, I could then Heroes Downfall the Elspeth, and if Eric just goes to try to untap here, then I had to take my shot at it.
Right. At the very least, he's taking care of 3 mana of Eric's on this turn. And the soldiers continue the attacks. This is 4 of them swinging in, threatening to put Jessup down to 5 as Elspeth moves closer and closer to her ultimate.
Now, potentially some big draws here for Dan. I don't know if he has any he has 1 copy of Golgari Charm in his list. People regularly bring this in against blue-white control to fight Detention Sphere, Banishing Light, and regenerate from Supreme Verdict potentially. This may be a spot where the -1/-1 mode could come up if Dan's able to find his copy. Could clear out those tokens, get a big attack in with the Desecration Demon.
Yeah, he really only needs to hit he either needs to successfully attack the Elspeth once or Heroes Downfall it here. And actually, he probably has 2 turns to deal with the Elspeth, as long as he can take care of the tokens in some way. An Elspeth emblem in this matchup is not, as long as if Jessup can take care of the creatures, the emblem is not particularly relevant on this board. I'd say Elspeth is largely a 1 ability planeswalker here.
It's one very good ability, though.
It's one very good ability. +1 make 3 creatures it's really strong.
Yeah. Very good in general, especially against an attrition-based removal deck with Desecration Demon. Making 3 +1/+1 tokens a turn. It's quite good. So I believe Eric may be contemplating using a Supreme Verdict here.
Well, it seems like one of the best ways to protect Elspeth is to simply just take care of all the creatures. And Rill's going to go ahead and do that. That does telegraph that he doesn't have a counter spell, so Jessup now knows if he can draw into, say, that downfall here, that should be a green light for him.
Yeah, be right back in it. But Eric's showing a lot of respect for the possibility of something like Golgari Charm or Hero's Downfall. Doesn't want to get into some sort of battle where he's all in on this Elspeth, and if something happens to it or the tokens, he just dies that turn. So with the Elspeth still in play, willing to take a slightly more conservative approach.
Yeah, the draw for turn was Grey Merchant of Asphodel for Jessup. It's actually a little problematic. He's 1 mana short of a play that he would want to make. Ideally, he would want to play Night Veil Spectre and Grey Merchant on the same turn. If he'd drawn a land that turn, he would have been able to do that and drain for 7, but he's actually 1 mana short of that. And that's important because he needs to drain all the way to past 9 mana to not die.
But this is still a pretty powerful setup here because it's not clear if Eric is going to be willing to pull the trigger.
Right, so he's drained himself back up to 9 and Rill's down to 6. Yeah, as we know, if Rill just makes an emblem and swings, that actually is lethal.
But it is a big risk.
It is a big risk.
Yeah. Now, Eric's hand may not allow him to do anything else, so.
Yeah, well, what I think is risky here is that Jessup chose that line over drawing a card off Underworld Connections first.
Sure.
Yeah, and Rill goes and calls, swings in, and Jessup has nothing. So 2-0, Eric Rill also moves into the win bracket for today.
Well, I think that I like Dan's play there because it gives him the maximum opportunity to bluff. If he draws with